This is the conclusion of our 3-part series on Saint John Bosco's dream, the Life-saving Raft. And if you'd like to see the other parts of the dream, I recommend clicking on the link I've put in the description below. You're watching The Miracles and Prophecies of Saint John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Don Bosco narrated the final part of his dream thusly. He said, "In the center of that great chapel in the castle stood a magnificent statue of Mary, Help of Christians. I called all the boys who had scattered here and there to examine the beauty of that sacred statue. The whole multitude went before it to thank the Heavenly Virgin for the many favors she showed us. Here I noticed the immensity of that church, for all those thousands of boys seemed like a small group occupying the center of the chapel. While the boys gazed at that statue, it suddenly seemed to come alive and smile. 'Our Lady moved her eyes,' exclaimed some. And indeed, Blessed Mary turned her maternal eyes with overwhelming goodness upon those young men. Shortly afterward, they gave a second shout. 'Our Lady moved her hands.' Indeed, slowly opening her arms, she raised her mantle as if to welcome us all under it. Tears flowed down our cheeks. 'Our Lady moved her lips,' said some. There was a deep silence at first, then Our Lady opened her mouth and in a silvery, smooth voice spoke to us. 'If you will be loving children to me, I will be your loving mother.' At these words, we all fell to our knees and intoned the hymn, 'Praise Mary, O faithful tongues.' Our harmony was so solid and polished that I was overwhelmed by it. I awoke, and thus ended my vision. Do you see, my dear children, in this dream, we can recognize the stormy sea of this world. Suppose you will be docile, obedient to my words, and not listen to evil counselors. In that case, if we spend our lives trying to do good and avoid evil, if we have overcome all our bad tendencies, we will finally arrive at a safe shore at the end of our lives. Then a messenger will come to meet us, sent by our Blessed Lady. In the name of our good God, to refresh us from our labors, the messenger will introduce us into the royal garden, paradise. It is God's most loving, divine presence. But if you do the opposite of what I preach to you, you will end up in a tragic shipwreck if you decide to follow your way and ignore my advice." Later, in private, Don Bosco gave a more specific explanation of this dream concerning not only the oratory, but also the Salesians. The plains are the world. The water threatening to drown us in the dream represents the world's dangers. The vast flood signifies vices, unholy sayings, and persecution against all that is good. The mill represented an isolated and quiet place, but one that was nonetheless threatened, and the house of bread was the Catholic Church. The baskets of bread were the Holy Eucharist, serving as Viaticum for sailors. The raft represented the oratory. The tree trunk that formed a bridge from the mill to the raft was the cross, that is, the sacrifice of oneself to God with Christian mortification. But the plank that the young people tried to add as a more accessible bridge to enter the boat represented the transgression of the rules. Many go through life with selfish motives, a career, profit, honors, comfort, and changing one's condition and status. These then are the ones who do not pray and who mock the piety of others. The priests and clerics symbolized obedience and pointed to the signs of salvation possible because of obedience. The whirlpools are the various and tremendous persecutions that arose and will yet arise. The disobedient ones, who did not want to be on the raft and so set foot on the island that soon flooded, are those who re-enter the world from the oratory while scorning their calling. Then some sought refuge in other rafts. Many who fell into the water reached out their hands to those on our raft, and they got back on with the help of their companions. They were those of goodwill who, having fallen wretchedly into sin, put themselves back into God's grace through penance. The straight with the cats, monkeys, and other monsters represents the revolutions, occasions, and enticements to sin. Bugs in the eyes, on the tongue, and in the heart symbolize evil looks, obscene speech, and disordered feelings. The spring of purifying water, which made all insects die and healed anyone instantly, refers to the sacraments of confession and Holy Communion. The swamp and fire, however, are places of sin and damnation. This dream doesn't mean that all those who fell into the sludge and disappeared, and all those who burned in the flames, should be lost in hell. God forbid. But it does mean that those in mortal sin would have been eternally lost if they had died. The happy island is the Salesian Society, established and triumphant, and the splendid messenger who welcomes the young people and leads them to the castle and the temple seems to be a deceased pupil now in heaven, perhaps Dominic Savio. From Don Bosco's last sentence, we can see that this dream, like his other dreams, has a general meaning that refers mainly to the Salesian Society. On the morning of January 2nd, the young men were eager to know the state of their conscience. Hence, they ran to confess to Don Bosco in the sacristy. Then, after confession, one asked him how and where he had seen him in that mysterious dream. Don Bosco replied, "You were on the raft, fishing, and fell into the water several times, but I pulled you out and put you back on board." "Did you see me in the chapel?" the boy asked. "Oh, yes, Don Bosco replied. To a cleric from Vercelli in the courtyard who asked about himself, Don Bosco said, "You were reprimanding others and thus prevented them from fishing." Don Bosco was asked by a priest about his part in that scene. Don Bosco said, "I saw you segregated from the others, solitary, serious, in the corner of the ship, busy preparing hooks with the lines, which the others then took to fish." The pupils never forgot this dream, and it made a great impression on them. The young Agostino Samaria wrote, "I also remember that on one of the following evenings, curiously, Don Bosco gathered us on the patio and had us recite a third of the rosary for the needs of Holy Mother Church. When the prayer was over, he was welcomed with great festivity and cheers as he went among us, allowing us to lift him to the podium where he usually spoke. Letting the applause die down, he mentioned the joy the righteous would feel when they land on the shores of eternal happiness. He described the peace that a Christian enjoys by always living in God's grace. Wishing us a good night, he said, "When you undress to go to bed, do so with all modesty, remembering that God sees you. Then lie down and cross your hands on your chest, abandoning yourselves in the heart of Jesus and Mary. Take your rest." Thank you all so much for watching and sticking with us through this 3-part series, and if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of Saint John Bosco, please click on the link I've put on the screen. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.